The whole interface has changed, so I'm just trying to figure out how I even see. Oh, there we go. We got some people coming in. All right. Just give this a like, hit the share buttons on this so as many people can get in on this as possible. I'm going to be explaining to you very briefly, and I do mean very briefly. It's 10 o'clock in the morning here in Washington, D.C., and I'm going to be explaining to you very briefly why the media is really after Dominic Cummings, somebody who I don't have any long-standing love for, no affiliation with. I don't think we've ever even spoken. And I am going to just break this down for you a little bit, because there are elements in place here that, look, I'm in Washington, D.C. I've been here for a couple of years now. The news that I get from the UK is either usually through my friends, and most of you know who my friends are, or through when I decide to hate myself and turn on Sky News or something like that. And in the last couple of days, about 3 days ago, somebody alerted me to the fact that there was this whole Dominic Cummings furore going on, and it was about to kick off. And honestly, I just rolled my eyes and I said, you know what? I'm washing my hands of the British media. I have no interest in dealing with the British media. A lot of you guys know my historical interactions with the British media. And if you guys are wondering why I'm wearing a hat, it's morning hair. So we're going to get into a little bit why the media is really after Dominic Cummings, because I did feel like I would punish myself recently and turned on Sky News, and I started to watch the coverage of this thing. And having been sort of at the, you know, the crux of media hatred in the UK before, I recognized immediately what I think of as the telltale signs of a stitch up. Dominic Cummings is, again, and for those of you just joining, hit the like button, hit the share button. We're going to be going through some things here that not only do you need to know about, but everyone you know needs to know about, because there is a grade A stitch up going on right here. We're going to go and walk through all of it. I've written this as well in an article form. If you want to share it, it's on thenationalpulse.com. That's thenationalpulse.com. And the headline of the article is "The Real Reason Boris Johnson's Advisor is Being Hounded to Resign. Brexit, of course." And a lot of you guys, I'm looking in the chat channel, guessing that already, but we're going to go through the detail here. And specifically, I wanted to illuminate something I said 48 days ago. Some of you will know that I co-host a podcast radio show that's also televised here in the United States called War Room Pandemic. And on the War Room Pandemic show 48 days ago, I was asked to opine on Boris Johnson's hospitalization. And I don't know if you guys can hear it. You know, I haven't used this Facebook Live feature in a very long time, so I don't know exactly if you guys are going to be able to hear this perfectly or not. But I'm going to play this. Let's see if it plays through. Let me know.
Who's really the power in Downing Street? Really the power behind the Prime Minister and this kind of strange thought leader. Is he like a chief of staff, lead strategist? Yeah, chief strategist. Yeah. He's the evil genius. Right, and he has also been at home in quarantine for weeks now, so you don't really have anything. Now, as anybody would know who's watched Yes Minister or Yes Prime Minister over the years, this is where the civil service, where the bureaucrats really try and occupy the power. Didn't want to leave. It was the British civil service that kept them in. After the Brexit vote, the reason they never got out was the British civil service fought it. Yeah, and Mark Sedwill, who was originally going to be the guy that took over here as the ambassador to the United States, is now the cabinet secretary, is being said to have amassed power in the last couple of days, really trying to bureaucratize and centralize the pushback as the politicians drop like flies.
That was me 48 days ago, talking about how the cabinet secretary, Sir Mark Sedwill, was amassing power as Boris Johnson and Dominic Cummings were out. Boris Johnson, obviously, in hospital. Dominic Cummings was in self-quarantine as a result of some symptoms. of the coronavirus. And I had picked up, the reason I said that on the show is I had picked up just a nugget in a Guardian live blog. Now, a lot of people ask me out there, why do you watch CNN? Why do you read The Guardian? Or why do you read the Financial Times? Because every so often, ladies and gentlemen, be very, very clear about this, they will accidentally reveal themselves. They will tell you something about their plans, something about the dynamics that they're working with on their side of the equation, and they will reveal something about themselves that will necessarily help us understand what they're trying to do. And so it was about 48 or 49 days ago, it may have been the Guardian live blog from the day before, I noticed this throwaway line in there about Mark Sedwell amassing power in the vacuum. And then I went back this morning thinking about that. And I found some curiously timed profile pieces. Now, you can do this all yourselves. I'm not even asking you to believe me outright. Go away and do your own research if you like. Everything that I've said so far, and we'll recap. So if you're just joining us, welcome. We'll do a little recap in a moment. It's on thenationalpulse.com. It's the lead article at the moment. It's called "The Real Reason Boris Johnson Advisor is Being Hounded to Resign, Brexit, of Course." Now, I haven't even got to the meat yet. Okay, we're just flirting right now. This is the foreplay. So hit that like button, hit that share button. We're going to get to the meat right now, because I don't like to sit here for a long time and do these things. I'm hungry. It's breakfast time where I am. So I went back this morning and I started to look at where Mark Sedwell had been mentioned in the press over the last 50, 60 days. And there were these fawning pieces about him in BuzzFeed and Business Insider and the New York Times, you know, hardly Brexit supporting, right-wing, even neutral outlets. These are the places that you go to plant stories about your friends or yourself if you know that you've got a battle coming up soon and you want people thinking well of you. And that's exactly what has happened here. Sedwell has had these things placed about him, and Sedwell as well. And by the way, somebody very important in the British political set this morning texted me, I won't say who it is yet, maybe only with their permission, said, "I bet Sedwell is behind that civil service tweet as well." I'm sure most of you would have seen this. The cabinet, wherever it was, that tweeted about how arrogant and whatever Boris Johnson is, may well have been a stitch up by Mark Sedwell pushing one of the juniors in his team to do that. Anyway, I digress. I want to read from something that proves this thesis now. It was an article by Jeremy Warner in the Telegraph. And this was written on May the 12th. Okay, so we're a couple of weeks beyond this right now. But the article says this, and I'll widen my eyes and slow down at the points you really need to listen to. Now, I'm going to quote this section for you so you know the context behind it. I'm not hiding anything from you. The link to that article is also on thenationalpulse.com in that lead story about why they're after Dominic Cummings. And for all of you joining just now, you have to know that I have no affiliation with Dominic Cummings. I don't think I've ever even met the guy, and I don't think he particularly enjoys the concept of Raheem either. So here's what we're going to do. Read this Telegraph article from May the 12th. Quote, "Engulfed by the pandemic, there are rather bigger fish for everyone to fry than Britain's future relationship with the EU. Under prior instructions from their political masters, negotiators on both sides of the fence exist in a bubble all of their own, seemingly oblivious to the storm raging outside. Yesterday's battles being fought against the backdrop of a world in transformation. Past obsessions have been rendered virtually irrelevant by the COVID-19 threat. Yet they persist unperturbed amid the confusion of Zoom calls. It is the curse of David Frost and Michel Barnier, the British and EU chief negotiators, respectively, to carry on regardless." Now pay very close attention here. Quote, "A deal to extend the transition in light of the crisis had all but been agreed at the official level. The EU was to have spared the UK's blushes by proposing it, rather than the other way around. This would have allowed the UK government to present the concession as a favour to the EU, rather than a climb down. But then Dominic Cummings, the Prime Minister's chief advisor, returned, and the plan concocted by underlings while he and Boris Johnson were laid out on their sick beds was scuppered. All right. So that was earlier this month. You think about what I said, and I know some of you have just joined. You think about, so I'm going to play it again, Sam. What I said on the War and Pandemic show, which now has 7,000 views on this clip, has 7,000 views on Twitter, and I just tweeted it out. So make sure you go to @Raheem Kassam on Twitter, retweet it. I'm going to actually pin this as my pinned tweet right now so you can find it easily. But this is what I said 48 days ago on the War and Pandemic podcast. I want you to listen very closely.
Dominic Cummings, who's really the power in Downing Street, really the power behind the Prime Minister and this kind of strange thought leader. Is he like a chief of staff lead strategist? Yeah, chief strategist. Yeah. He's the evil genius. Right, and he has also been at home in quarantine for weeks now, so you don't really have anything. Now, as anybody would know who's watched Yes Minister or Yes Prime Minister over the years, this is where the civil service, where the bureaucrats really try and occupy the power. Didn't want to leave. It was the British civil service that kept them in after the Brexit vote. The reason they never got out was the British civil service fought it. Yeah, and Mark Sedwill, who was originally going to be the guy that took over here as the ambassador to the United States, is now the cabinet secretary, is being said to have amassed power in the last couple of days, really trying to bureaucratize and centralize the pushback as the politicians drop like flies.
You know, there is a global pandemic going on, and Mark Sedwill and his team are using it as a cover by which to assassinate Brexit or attempt again. I'm going to just pay attention to what you just heard, and let me read for you those final 2 paragraphs from the Telegraph from 2 weeks ago again. Because remember, the media will leave breadcrumbs. They don't know they're doing it. And the reason they don't know they're doing it is because not every editor-in-chief is plugged into what the critical Remainers are planning. Not every journalist. They'll get nuggets, they'll get crumbs, and sometimes they'll leave some of those crumbs behind them. And that's why, no matter how much it hurts me and upsets me and triggers me and bores me, I will watch CNN and the BBC and Sky News, and I will read The Guardian, the Financial Times, because, so you don't have to, because they leave crumbs behind, crumbs like this that we can figure out what they're up to when they're up to it. Let's go through this again, the last 2 paragraphs of this Telegraph article. Quote, a deal to extend the transition in light of the crisis had been all but agreed at the official level. The EU was to have spared the UK's blushes by proposing it rather than the other way round. This would have allowed the UK government to present the concession as a favour to the EU rather than a climb down. But then Dominic Cummings, the Prime Minister's chief advisor, returned, and the plan concocted by underlings while he and Boris Johnson were laid out on their sick beds was scuppered. So if you want to know why there is such a massive furore about a man driving to his parents' house, if you want to understand why throngs of pseudo-reporters are gaggled like jackals outside this man's house, screaming and shouting and spitting in his face without their masks on, it is because for them and for Mark Sedwill, and to a great extent for people like Carrie Symonds, Boris Johnson's fiancée, who is an anti-Brexiteer too, Dominic Cummings represents the last stand against delaying Brexit again. Now, Dominic Cummings and I, and Dominic Cummings and Nigel Farage, and Dominic Cummings and UKIP, we never saw eye to eye on specifically how we got to where we wanted to get to, but we won that battle. You know, Leave.eu was far more prominent than Vote Leave. The immigration argument was far more prominent than Dominic Cummings and Matthew Elliott wanted it to be, and that's fine. I will consider that hatchet buried. For now, Dominic Cummings is the last chunk in the wall that the political establishment thinks that they have to remove in order to stop Brexit. And that is all you need to know about this concocted furore. There are bigger news stories, not least on the south coast of England, where we have a new migrant crisis taking place. And the media is focused on a man who drove a car. Now, granted, I understand that Britain's lockdown has been far more antediluvian, far more strict than here in the United States. There is, I can go outside as many times in the day as I want. I have a wonderful mask here that my girlfriend made for me. I'll show you guys as well. 2 wonderful masks. But I am keeping up the British end. But I go out, I don't wear it in the street. If I wear it, I go grocery shopping or whatever. But I understand that there are distinctions, and that what Dominic Cummings did maybe wasn't the wisest thing to do. Fine. Does it lend to this level of hysteria? And if you're a Remainer watching this, if you're an anti-Brexit person, if you're on the fence, just ask yourself, does the level of hysteria we're seeing from the media, is it commensurate with what is said to have taken place? And if it's not, then you have to question the premise. Question the entire premise of why they're doing this, why now, why so much, and I've just walked you through it. It's all on thenationalpulse.com. The headline, the lead story, it's on my Twitter, it's everywhere you need it to be. And you need to share this so people understand. The headline is the real reason Boris Johnson's advisor is being hounded to resign. Brexit, of course. And I think on that basis, I'll see about answering a couple of questions. I know there are a lot of comments coming in. Again, I haven't used this Facebook Live function in quite a while. And I'm not sure if these questions are live, or delayed, in the right order, whatever it is. But if you hit me with something, if you want to talk about something, I'm here for you for the next, let's say, 5 to 7 minutes. How about that? If you hit those hearts and likes and the little huggy ones and all of that, it would make me very happy as well, because the more engagement in general there is with a post like this, the more people will see it. And the more people that see it, let's hope more people come to the realization rapidly that, look, I don't care about Dominic Cummings, the man. I don't care about even the lack of humanity in all of this from the media. That's built in now, right? We know that they are evil people. They are enemies of the people, the real people out there. We get all that. That's built in. But it'll be over my dead body that they scupper Brexit, So let's. Donnie Ross asks, Raheem, do you think he will survive? There's people can read between the lines. I don't do live streams like this very often. I don't really interfere in Westminster politics anymore. The reason I am doing so is because I fear the worst. And this is my way, and I direct messaged him earlier, Cummings, that is. And by the way, I have Boris Johnson on WhatsApp. I could quite easily send Boris a message as well. But it's one of those things where you think, am I going to make the situation worse or better, as Farage's former chief of staff, if I message the Prime Minister about something? But I did DM Dominic Cummings this morning. I just said 3 words. I said, do not resign. And what I really want to see is people out there, you guys out there, pushing for the same thing, sharing this article, sharing the video that's a pinned tweet on my Twitter. And of course, Dominic Cummings, I think, is due to make a statement at around 4 p.m. Stephen Smith says, totally after him over Brexit. He would be a big influence of what's to come. Exactly. Paul Georgeson is more optimistic than I am. He says he won't resign. Look, I think it's not in his nature to resign. I think it is in his nature to fight everything. I just hope that keeps up. Trends can be broken, and I just hope it doesn't break at this point. Deborah Millward asks an interesting question. Why Brexiteers calling for Cummings to resign, i.e. Steve Baker? Thank you. My hat is off to you. My hair is awful. Steve Baker and those sorts of Brexiteers are calling for Dominic Cummings to resign because there is bad blood left over from the Leave campaign. There is still bad blood left over between Aaron Banks and some of those guys. There is still internal bad blood left over between inside Vote Leave as well. And this is sort of one of those long drawn out things. A lot of people are now taking their opportunities to try and knife Dominic Cummings because of things that they've perceived that he's done to them over the years. And Steve Baker was maybe relegated at some point, wasn't used as a spokesman at some point, didn't get to do a debate at some point, and this is their way of exacting revenge. And I think it's pathetic. I think it's petty. I had some respect for Steve Baker before this. I have none left. Steve Baker should be putting the party over his personal grievances, and he should be putting the country over the party, as far as I'm concerned. So, and that's that's the delineation, that's the prioritization of things as I've always seen it. You are bigger than yourself, or you should be, especially if you're a public representative. But these guys don't often do that. Let's see. Do you guys have a War Room app? Keep seeming to miss it. Looks like a brilliant podcast. Well, I thank you for that. For those that don't know, we do a daily show, War Room Pandemic, here from Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. It's myself, Steve Bannon, the former White House chief strategist, Jason Miller, former communications advisor to President Trump, and Jack Maxey. And you can get it at warroom.org or pandemic.warroom.org. You can get it on all iTunes, Apple, Google Play. It's on YouTube. It's on Facebook. It's everywhere. Just type in War Room Pandemic. This is not an advert. I'm not trying to do an advertisement right now. But thank you for the question and for talking about it. I really appreciate that. The more people to see it, the better. I'm just going through these comments now. Hi, okay, Rob Harrop, Raheem, I am from Australia and it seems like nothing to me. Ignore the more news stories tomorrow. Yeah, except this is now, what, the third day in the news cycle of this? I mean, I was trying to ignore it at first. I thought there's surely no way that the British media will have lost its collective mind in such a spitting and hysterical way. But then I realized I slept on it and I thought about it and I've been trying to figure it out. And then I thought back and I remembered this clip that I talked about on War and Pandemic 48 days ago. And then I remembered seeing this thing in The Guardian. Then my good friend Jack Montgomery sends me this article in The Telegraph. And by the way, Jack, a fantastic reporter and writer. You should make sure you're following Jack Montgomery. He sent me this thing this morning from The Telegraph by Jeremy Warner, which I just read out. And I said to myself, oh my goodness, it all makes sense. And I'm sure some of you would have figured this out yourselves by now, or at least had the intuition to figure out where this was all coming from. But I just couldn't believe how brazen and blatant it was right there in front of us for all to see. So if you have not checked it out, if you missed the first part of this live stream, make sure you go to thenationalpulse.com. That's my new website. So it'd be great if you would do all of the things that you're supposed to do on things like that, like and share and Facebook and what was that, Harry Enfield and Chums. If you Twitter and tweet, then Twitter and tweet us. I, of course, won't be reading any of them. He actually got it very right. You remember the Harry Enfield thing where they had the question time, and the other one was the guy in the audience who would just always go, or if Boris Johnson, then Boris Johnson should Boris Johnson. And that is what the media is nowadays. So thenationalpulse.com, the real reason Boris Johnson's advisor is being hounded to resign Brexit. Of course, I go through everything in there. It's all linked. It's all cited. I have my clip from 48 days ago as well, where I predicted that Mark Sedwill and the British political establishment would try and amass power with Cummings and Johnson out. And it's all there for you to share. So that's it. That's what I wanted to jump on here, and hopefully you guys can do the thing that you guys do, which I'm ever so grateful for, which is sharing, making sure so many other people see it. I can't tell you how much it means to me when I see big numbers, because it means all the hard work that we put into things, all these old books we read and go through, right? That just can be so boring sometimes, but all the work that we put in, it's so great when you guys end up spreading that widely and we actually impact something along the way as a result of all the hard work. So thank you. Have a great Monday, I guess it is. It is a holiday here in the United States. It's Memorial Day, so happy Memorial Day, remembering the sacrifices of servicemen. And yeah, I'll see you another time. I'll probably do another one of these. Oh, I don't know, in 2 years' time.
We will make America great again.